What is up guys, Fire here, and today we're going to be answering a question that I get asked all the time, and that is what role is best to carry solo queue with. Now the honest answer is that any role can carry, and the best advice is to play what you are actually best at. Now that's kind of a cheeky answer, right? It doesn't really answer much, and so really there are a couple of roles that I think that make the game easier, especially at kind of lower elo and from plat and below. Now first thing, there are kind of two ways that you can win a game, right? You either make yourself so strong that you can carry everyone on your team, or you make your teammates stronger. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to look at kind of the three best roles I think for carrying solo queue at plat and below, and we'll go through what playstyles are good for each one and why they're good and why they're not. Now let's start with the one that probably has the most impact in the game at lower elo, and that's going to be the jungle. The meta right now is tanks, tanks, and more tanks. They can get away with making mistakes because they're so tanky, and they're pretty easy to play as well. They tend to have really heavy crowd control with a lot of damage as well, but the biggest thing is the map pressure that they have. Now they can either gank early and kind of win people's lanes for them, or they can rescue lost lanes by going and helping them if they get behind. Pretty much every jungler has a good kit for team fighting, and they have the ability to pick fights, and picking good fights is one of the easiest ways to win a game. If you think about it, picking good fights, getting objectives, getting picks is probably one of the easiest ways to win, and on the other side of it, the easiest way to throw the game is by picking bad fights, and if you're the one picking the fights, then you can avoid that. Okay, so moving on to mid lane, and mid lane can also affect the entire map just like junglers can. They can affect top lane, they can help their jungler, and they can also roam bot lane as well. Now as a laner, obviously I like to think of this as kind of a more mechanical version of the jungle. Like you can still have the impact by roaming around, but you have to actually be good at the game to pull it off. Alright, that's probably enough digs at junglers for now. But anyway, so mid laners have high mid game damage, and mid game is where most games are won and lost because that's when team fights start to happen. Like in most games, right, mid game is where you start to take dragons, you start to take towers, and you start team fights. And the team that is winning the fights and getting the towers often is the one that snowballs that into a lead. So mid laners can one-shot people, they can poke people, they can outplay with a few items because they scale with levels. Like something most people don't think about is that mid laners go mid because they get solo experience, and they want the levels in their abilities because that's where a lot of their damage comes from. As I said, they can roam pretty early and affect the entire map, and it's also a 1v1 lane that lets you completely outplay your opponent, and in theory if you are better than they are, then you're going to get ahead. So next we'll move on to AD carry, and ADs can probably carry the hardest if they're given a lead because they really need items to be effective. The reason they aren't kind of higher on this list is because they have quite a few drawbacks in lower elo. Like they can't really affect the rest of the map, and if their team gets really far behind, then they simply just don't have the time to kill everyone. Now when you get a lead as an AD carry, right, you can easily dump the opposing bot lane and you can get ahead, but that doesn't necessarily help the rest of your team. Like you can take your tower, you can take dragons, but at the end of the day, if the rest of your team is feeding, there's no way to help them. Now carrying hard as an AD carry revolves around winning your lane, farming well, and getting items before those mid-game fights break out. The issue is that if you have a player who doesn't play support with you, because it's a 2v2 lane, then you're going to struggle to win your lane hard, and you're going to struggle to get those items. So those are the three roles I think you can carry solo queue with the easiest, and the other two, there's nothing wrong with being a top laner or a support, it's just harder to have an impact on the rest of the map. Like as a top laner, you're on an island. That phrase gets thrown around all the time. It's an isolated 1v1 lane. You can roam to mid and you can teleport to bot, but they're both pretty risky because if you don't get anything out of it, you can lose your tower and lose a lot of farm. Carry top laners can be really effective though, because once you get far enough ahead, you can't really be ganked, and it's basically just free farm until you're insanely strong. The problem is, and the reason it didn't make it into the three best roles, is because you can't really do much if the rest of your team are bad and struggling. Okay, so moving on to supports. Now, supports can carry the game, don't get me wrong, but it's very difficult to do it from behind. You're really the engage, you're just protecting, and if your team isn't very good or they're behind, then there isn't too much you bring except keeping vision up and trying to create some picks. Now, I play a lot of support on my Smurf, and playmaking supports are the easiest way to go. So you play something like Annie or Thresh and you feed your AD carry kills and make them strong. If they are really strong, then it doesn't really matter if they make a bad choice or bad position, because chances are they have enough damage to cover up their weaknesses. The kind of problem you run into is that your job is to feed them in lane, right, and you can do that effectively, but then once you're out of lane, it's their job to kind of carry the rest of the game, and if they don't live up to that, then you're kind of in trouble. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and don't be discouraged from playing your role or anything like that. Every single role can carry the entire way up to Challenger. These are just probably the best ones to climb quickly out of the lower leagues. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That's all for this time, but I'll catch you in my next video.